through 21, it says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? So this is what they did. It said, so they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father told you before he died, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in God's place. Then he says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. You know, the interesting thing about the story of Joseph is that it teaches us how to live in the midst of pain and suffering. It teaches us how to face uncertainty and the constant ups and downs of life and not be overcome by trials. You know, because trials can do one or two things to you. They can crush you, or they can become the crucible that shapes your character and molds us into a stronger, more resilient man or woman of God. You know, some people can make it through stuff, and then sometimes there are some people who just cave in under the weight of what they're dealing with. And when you look at this passage, you see a number of social dynamics at work. On the one hand, you see the fulfillment of the dream of Joseph that one day his brothers would bow before him. And so there's this piece that now they've got to eat their words, saying that they would never bow before their brother, but here they are eating cheese, bowing down. All right, so you got that piece going. Then you got the other thing, the guilt trip, because they're still agonizing over what they had done 30 years earlier, and they're wondering whether or not Joseph is going to seek revenge. You know, here's an interesting thing about life, that sometimes, you know, no matter what you've done to somebody, you might think that you've forgotten it, but that thing is living in your mind and in your heart and in your spirit, and it just will not go away until you make some stuff right. I wish I had just 2 or 3 folks who were on the same page I am. Then there is the lingering impact of family betrayal and conspiracy, which are not always easy to overcome. And I mentioned this morning that sometimes you don't need enemies if you got family members. Because sometimes the folk in your family can be worse than your enemies. Oh, and I know when I said that this morning, I shook some nerves, and some people said, oh, no, I think you need to correct that. But every time I read the newspaper, I find that there's some kid that done shot his mama, done killed his daddy, that some of y'all know some babies and ray-rays that stole the money of the mom and the daddy to support their drug habits. Sometimes, if you didn't have any family members, you wouldn't have any enemies. And so here, they're dealing with some stuff that happened in the house. All right? These were the brothers who turned against the younger brother. And some of us have already lived through some of this kind of stuff, that it wasn't the folk on the street that was my problem. It was the folk living in my house. Can I preach on just a little bit? I think you're going to see where we're going here. It says, Joseph then allayed the fears and the concerns of his brother and lets them know that there are some things that only God can deal with. And though he was a high official in Egypt, he was still not God. It was not his place to take it upon himself to punish them for their sins. He might be angry, disappointed, broken, and wanting to hold a grudge, but only God could make right what had been done to him in his family. And then this thing just kind of speaks. He says, am I God? I'm not God. He said, but here, let me just kind of remind you of something. You meant it for evil. Huh? He said, you meant to do what you did, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result to preserve many people alive. May I offer just a few nuggets that may be a blessing to somebody today who may be facing a crisis. Maybe it's a crisis with breast cancer, or maybe you're dealing with the effects of a bad economy. But there's some stuff in this story, I tell you, that every time I read it, it just helps me just a little bit more. Can I just share a few thoughts with you? The first thing that I would tell you is that we have to learn to get beyond the evil things that people perpetrate against us and leave some matters to God. In case you just got here, one of the realities of life is that you're going to have enemies who mean you no good. Every one of us has enemies who will do everything in their power to destroy you. Joseph said to his brothers, you meant to hurt me. You meant to kill me. You meant to get rid of me. You meant to rob me of my life and childhood. But God flipped the script, turned it around, and worked it out for my good. All of us have had some of them but moments. You went to that interview and people told you that when you go there, you're not going to get that job. But somehow or another, when you got there, God gave you favor. You've been facing a financial hardship for the last 12 or 16 months, and you didn't know how you were going to make it, but God made a way out of no way, some kind of way. They found a lump in your breast, and people started to write your obituary and started to apply for your job, but God worked it out where you're still here. You were lost in your sin, but God saved you one day. Joseph said, you meant it for evil, but God turned the situation around. Joseph's brothers were too concerned about their plan, their scheme, their intentions to get rid of him. They wanted to eliminate Joseph and thereby kill his dream and ruin his destiny. But underneath all of that stuff was the hand of God. You know, here, let me just help somebody here today, because sometimes you think that you're living in isolation and that God doesn't have a clue about what's going on in your life. But I want you to know that even when bad stuff is happening in your life, God is working some stuff out that might just be to your benefit later on. Walter Brueggemann says that God had a plan that was written within the divine will and prerogative. You know, I'm glad that God knows how to take the stuff that people mess up in my life and then turn that thing around so that it works out for my benefit. Have I got a witness in the house? They didn't see what was happening because you can't always discern what God is doing. His ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are not our thoughts. As high as the heavens are above the earth, that's how high God is above us. And one of the things that I've learned and that you and I have to learn is we have to learn how to recognize that everything doesn't necessarily have an explanation. Now, we don't know how Joseph got over his hurt caused by his brothers, but at some point he moved beyond what happened to him. You may try to find a reason why folk turned against you. You don't have to have a reason. People turn against you because they want to. We cannot resolve everything that people have done to us. And we can't explain why some people get breast cancer and some don't. Some things you have to leave up to God. How often have we given people who have plotted against us the opportunity to hold fear and failure over us because we could not get over what they did to us? How often have we allowed the haters and the hurters to keep us locked in the straitjackets of pain and disappointment because we had a pity party crying over what they did to us? At some point, you have to get over the things that have happened in your life and then go on and live, because the longer you keep yourself tethered to what folk have done to you, you never will begin to walk in the destiny and the design that God has for your life. Yes, there are pains, but if you keep living, you're going to have some more pains. And if you keep living, you might even have some bigger pains. Many of us spend too much time in mourning about what used to be and forget that we are called to live in tomorrow. You know, on Thursday it rained and the wind was blowing, and then it rained all day Thursday, and then Thursday night and Friday, but then it stopped raining, and on Saturday morning we woke up to a morning without clouds. And though it was cloudy all day Thursday and Friday, come Saturday morning the sun was shining bright and clear. Come here, let me help somebody here today. You might be in the rain now, but if you just wait a while, the sun will shine after a while. Joseph never would have survived had he spent time rehearsing over what his brothers had done to him, how they had messed him up, how he had been stripped. He never would have survived had he spent time thinking about how they took from me this, and they stole my clothes, and they ruined my coat of many colors. But he would not allow himself to sink into depression. Yes, there are people, there are circumstances that will come up against you, but we believe that God has a bigger design for everything. There are times in life when you have to muster the strength to move on. There are times in life when you might have folk on your job that don't like you, but you got to get up, put on your clothes, put on your mascara, put on your best suit, and go to work anyhow. I wish I had somebody. Yeah, she moved out of the house and left you with the kids and all of the bills, but you still got to live. He packed up and moved in with your girlfriend, but you still got to live. They foreclosed on your house because you missed 3 payments, but you still got to live. They didn't give you that promotion even though you earned it, but you still got to live. You got to learn how to pick yourself up, get over what people have done to you, and go on and live a little while. I wish I could help somebody here today, because some of you are holding on to stuff that you've got tethered to your leg. Get over what they did to you. Stop crying about what happened to you, because the longer you cry about it, you never will see what God has for you. Yeah, Junebug is a headache, but let him go. At some point, you have to stop living with what folk have done to you. Why are you going to give somebody that much power over your life? How are you going to give somebody that much authority over you? Don't you know who you are? You can't live, because the longer I let you keep me pressed down because I'm thinking about what you did to me, I never will become what God wants me to be. I'll become bitter and angry and resentful, and I will lose my focus, and I'll lose direction on what God wants me to do. Baby, I'm not going to let you have that kind of energy. Not over me. Release yourself. You got to release yourself from what folk have done to you. Life is too important to spend going to bed at night wondering what they're going to say about you tomorrow when you get to work. They're going to say what they say. Am I right about it? If they're going to talk about you, they're going to talk about you. So why are you going to go to bed at night wondering what they're going to say about you? What I like to do is get excited because y'all spend that much time on the job thinking about me. which means that you ain't thinking about what you need to be thinking about. I've become the center of your attention. Think of it that way. Now, you know, I mentioned today, and Rosetta would tell you this is true. When I go to bed at night, I don't go to bed with no issues. I just go to bed with her.